Egypt's president welcomes the president of Somalia in Al-Alamein. Donald Trump is to meet Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House today. And Lebanon's health ministry reports at least 10 wounded in Israeli airstrikes on the south. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Hani Saif, and we start this afternoon's bulletin in Africa, where Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has met with Somalia's President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud in Al-Alamein. The leaders discussed strengthening ties and regional security. Sisi and Mahmoud first held close talks before joining their delegations for expanded discussions. Sisi reaffirmed Egypt's support for Somalia's stability and development, stressing on the importance of joint efforts to fight terrorism and uphold sovereignty. Both sides agreed to boost cooperation in security, military coordination and other fields to advance shared interests. The Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati has held a phone call with South Sudan's Foreign Minister to discuss bilateral ties and regional issues. Abdulati reaffirmed Egypt's support for South Sudan's security and stability, stressing the importance of stronger cooperation. He also highlighted a rise in Egyptian investments across various sectors over the past 10 years. For his part, South Sudan's foreign minister praised the historic relations with Egypt and expressed readiness to work together on shared water concerns and development projects. U.S. President Donald Trump says a ceasefire with Hamas and a detainee release deal could be reached this week. Speaking before departing his New Jersey golf resort, Trump hinted that the agreement might secure the release of quite a few detainees from Gaza. The remarks come ahead of his meeting today with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. Trump also described his call with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky as good, voiced disappointment over his recent conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
The attack turned out, according to every single atomic energy commission, that was a complete and total obliteration.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his talks with U.S. President Donald Trump could help advance the Gaza ceasefire and detainee release. Netanyahu stated that Israeli negotiators have been told to secure a ceasefire under terms acceptable to Israel. His visit to the White House, his third since Trump returned to office, comes amid growing public calls for a permanent ceasefire. Hamas has shown a positive initial response to a U.S.-backed proposal, but key challenges to finalizing the agreement remain. Israeli airstrikes on Gaza have killed several displaced Palestinians, including women and children, in new attacks across Gaza City. Israeli fighter jets targeted a tent sheltering civilians near a mosque in southern Gaza City on Monday evening, leaving multiple dead and wounded. In a separate strike, 2 members of the Ramloui family were killed when their home in Al-Tufah was hit, with others critically injured. Earlier attacks in Gaza City and Rafah claimed 3 more lives and left several wounded as strikes continue to devastate densely populated areas. An Israeli airstrike has hit a former clinic in Gaza City where displaced Palestinians were sheltering, killing 6 people. The director of a Shifa medical complex, Dr. Muhammad Abu Salamia, confirmed that 6 people were killed and at least 15 others injured in late Sunday strike. The clinic had been out of service and was housing families seeking refuge. The attack comes as U.S. brokered ceasefire talks gain new momentum with renewed hopes for a possible deal. Israel's military has ordered Palestinians in Qnews to evacuate westwards, warning of intense strikes targeting rocket launch sites. Israeli army spokesperson for Arab media, Avichai Adrai, urged residents to leave for their safety and avoid returning to combat zones. Earlier, Israel reported hitting around 130 sites across Gaza City. Since military operations resumed on March 18th, and 6,800 Palestinians have been killed, raising the overall death toll since October 2023 to over 50,400. Gaza's field hospitals are facing a critical blood shortage as supplies run dangerously low under the ongoing Israeli siege. Authorities say only a third of the needed blood units have been delivered. Dr. Marwan Al-Hams, director of Gaza's field hospitals, confirmed they received just 3,500 units but need over 10,000. He urged residents in the occupied West Bank to help, though Israeli restrictions are blocking deliveries. The shortage further deepens the humanitarian crisis, straining Gaza's medical facilities. A group of jurists have filed an urgent legal appeal to block a military shipment bound for Israel. The group, Jurists for the Respect of International Law, says the delivery could impact France in violations of international law, especially over the Gaza conflict. They warn that authorizing such transfers may amount to complicity in crimes denounced by both the ICJ and the ICC. The shipment reportedly originated from a Swedish company. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has resumed food aid deliveries in the Strip after temporarily halting operations due to an attack injuring 2 U.S. contractors. The suspension affected 4 aid sites, but services have now restarted. Aid workers say many in Gaza remain cut off from reliable dates. Since May 27th, at least 750 Palestinians have died in attacks targeting aid distribution points. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has warned that Gaza's food system has completely collapsed under the blockade. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres expressed deep concern over the worsening humanitarian crisis, renewing calls for an immediate ceasefire and unconditional release of all detainees. Guterres said families are risking their lives searching for food as acute malnutrition rates among children have doubled and infant formula supplies are nearly gone. Nearly 57% of Danes now say Israel's operations in Gaza have been excessive, marking a significant rise since October when 45% shared this view. The poll, conducted for Danish broadcaster DR, also found almost half of respondents back suspending the EU's association agreement with Israel. Only 22% oppose such political action, highlighting a shift in public opinion amid the ongoing conflict. And for further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by Al-Ahram newspaper managing editor, Mr. Ashraf Al-Ashri. Mr. Ashri, welcome to Qnews. Sir, what are the main obstacles preventing a final ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas right now?
Of course, there is a group of conditions put by Hamas to retaliate, to respond to the positive mediation conditions related to the end of the end stage of exchanging hostages, to immediate ceasefire, humanitarian and aid access through the UN, UNRWA, and Palestinian Red Crescent, and to end what Council is called a Gaza humanitarian organization, as it is considered a failure organization, caused a killing of many Palestinians, putting into consideration that all obstacles can be addressed if there is American pressure to reach a humanitarian aid between both parties and truce, and to have what is called humanitarian committee to take over what's going on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've mentioned, sir, American pressure. So how significant is U.S. President Trump's role in pushing this proposed ceasefire and detainee deal forward? He did mention that a deal can be struck within a few days.
Of course, yes, indeed. Into effect during the upcoming days. The U.S. president has the key pressure card on Netanyahu and the occupation government. If Trump executed what he announced during the past days to reach a truce, to be entered into effect during the upcoming days, once there is meetings held with senior mediators in Qatar, Egypt, and the U.S. to agree on all arrangements in order to reach the agreement of hostages exchange, in addition to put an end to the occupation hostility.
Well, reports say that Israel has, in principle, agreed to the ceasefire deal, but what are Hamas's key conditions for agreeing as well to the deal and the detainee release?
Has demands, legitimate demands related to put an end to Israeli occupation, because the experience learned Hamas that Netanyahu is not honest in his words. In January 19th of this year, Trump decided a truce accepted by both Hamas and Israel. On January 18th, it was violated by Hamas and conducted a carnage that is still going on till now. Therefore, Hamas doesn't want to repeat the mistake. It wants a security guarantees, and I think that President Trump will guarantee that Israel will go forward in executing an immediate ceasefire and committing to all what will agree on from the truce conditions, and also a timeline from Israeli occupation withdrawal, in addition to humanitarian aid access equals 1,000 trucks through Rafah border. All of this will be announced by President Trump, according to expectations, to have a final withdrawal from Israel. Maybe the second phase will start in the upcoming days.
Well, so what about the Israeli expectations? How does Netanyahu's insistence on the terms acceptable to Israel affect the negotiations?
For sure, Netanyahu wants to have gains from President Trump when they meet today in regards to Israel-Iran war, and to have another chance for Israel to raid against Iran, with the assumptions that they haven't completely destroyed Iranian nuclear uranium program. So they are launching air raids on the southern Lebanon in return for having U.S. military services in favor of Israel in the upcoming period. Therefore they will agree on ceasing fire in Gaza in return of having U.S. gains in the war with Iran. All of this will depend on President Trump's reaction when they order Netanyahu to cease fire in Gaza, but in return they will want to gain big U.S. war gains in his war against Iran.
So what about the Israeli aggression? What impact might the ongoing Israeli airstrikes on Gaza have on the possibility of actually reaching an agreement this week? Will it have any impact whatsoever, or has this become the norm now?
Of course, if there is an agreement announced by Trump in his meeting in the White Office today, if they decided to accept the agreement and allow the mediators, the negotiators, to return to discussions, the first term of the agreement is to stop Israeli aggression on land and air immediately for 60 days completely, especially that there is a lot of indexes in the U.S. confirming that Trump will be the guarantee to to the non-Israeli violation of this truce again. This war, when the killing stops, that will allow the citizens. This will allow the citizens from Egypt, Israel, Egypt, and Qatar to monitor the internal affairs of Israel and in Gaza Strip and to tackle the humanitarian crisis there. Maybe the truce will succeed as long as the US pressure continue with the same power.
Mr. Ashraf Al-Ashri from Cairo, Al-Ahram newspaper managing editor, thank you very much for joining us here on Q News. Moving on, Spain's famous San Fermin festival has begun in Pamplona with a pro-Palestinian activist shouting political slogans just before the traditional chupinazo firecracker. The chupinazo, a firecracker that signals the start of Pamplona's San Fermin festival, was lit amid a rare political outburst by the group Yala Nafarro por Palestina. Thousands of festival goers dressed in white and red scarves celebrated the traditional festivities. The event, running to 14, draw tourists worldwide who come to watch runners race through the streets chased by bulls on an 875-meter course. Israeli settlers have stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in the occupied East Jerusalem, protected by Israeli police. Al-Aqsa has become a frequent target for such visits, often accompanied by right-wing politicians performing religious rituals. Under current Israeli rules, non-Muslims may visit but cannot pray or display religious symbols inside the compound.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Lebanon's health ministry has reported at least 10 people wounded in Israeli airstrikes across southern Lebanon. 9 were injured when Israeli jets hit the Rahal Tower in Tyre, while another attack in Zarari near Sidon wounded a child. The raids persist despite a US-brokered ceasefire signed in November to end more than a year of fighting with Hezbollah. The U.S. Special Envoy for Syria and Ambassador to Turkey, Thomas Barak, has said Washington is pushing for renewed dialogue to advance peace in the region. He praised recent Lebanese responses as spectacular, but warned that those resisting change risk being left behind. Barak emphasized that Israel wants peace with Lebanon, but finding a path forward is complicated by groups like Hezbollah. He stressed that peace requires trust, diplomatic agreements, and a mechanism to monitor ceasefires. Moving on, where Israel's occupation military has said 2 missiles were launched from Yemen overnight, hours after it struck ports and a power plant in the Gulf. No damage or casualties have been reported, and interception attempts are under review. The missiles were reportedly intercepted, but the army says it's still assessing the outcome. And to Rio de Janeiro, where representatives from BRICS nations have convened for the first annual summit in Brazil. The members are advocating for reforms of traditional Western institutions, positioning the bloc as a champion of multilateralism in a divided world. The summit marks the first attendance of Indonesia as a full member, while Chinese President Xi Jinping sent his prime minister instead and Russian President Vladimir Putin is participating online. Russian President Vladimir Putin has declared at the BRICS summit that the liberal globalization model is becoming outdated. He urged BRICS nations to enhance collaboration in areas such as natural resources, logistics, trade, and finance to adapt to the shifting global economic landscape. The Kremlin has dismissed suggestions that BRICS is aligned against the U.S. following a warning from U.S. President Donald Trump. Speaking ahead of the BRICS summit in Brazil, Trump threatened a 10% tariff on nations supporting what he called the bloc's anti-American policies. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov responded, saying BRICS operates on common interests, not opposition to any third country. He added that cooperation within BRICS has never been and will never be directed against others. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry has welcomed the BRICS summit's call for an immediate, unconditional ceasefire in Gaza and Israel's full withdrawal from occupied Palestinian territories. The Foreign Ministry praised the BRICS leaders' final communique from the Rio de Janeiro summit for supporting a lasting ceasefire in Gaza. The ministry urged urgent international intervention to stop Israel's aggression, calling for a political path based on international law and the Arab Peace Initiative. It stressed that achieving Palestinian rights is key to regional stability and peace in the world. The Russian army has attacked Zaporizhia with drones, injuring 10 people and causing destruction. Ivan Vedorov, head of Zaporizhia Oblast Military Administration, specified that the Russians launched 6 strikes with Shahed drones. Residential buildings, a university building, and businesses in Zaporizhia had been damaged. Ukraine is defending its decision to exit a global landmine treaty, citing military necessity amid heavy Russian pressure. Ukraine says it needs all tools available to resist Russian advances after announcing its withdrawal from the Ottawa Convention, a treaty banning anti-personnel mines. Military analysts say the weapons may be effective in stopping small Russian assault units. But rights groups warn of long-term civilian danger. Ukraine says it will use the mines responsibly and track their use to allow post-war clearance. These are all the news we have for now, but here's a reminder of today's main stories. Egypt's president welcomes the president of Somalia in El Alamein. Donald Trump is to meet Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House today. And Lebanon's health ministry reports at least 10 wounded in Israeli airstrikes on the south. This concludes our news bulletin for this hour, but please don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates coming up here on Q News.